Hey, welcome to the UkeStuff channel and welcome to this full UkeGuide review of this instrument. This is the Morse MUS-110 Soprano Ukulele. In this review, first of all, we'll talk about some subjective categories that I talk about with all instruments. Then we'll get into the specifications of the instrument, and then I'll summarize the instrument and give it a UkeGuide rating out of 5 possible ukuleles. If you don't want to watch the full video, you don't have to. You can slide at the bottom to chapters that matter to you. And you can also find the summary Uke guide at my website at UkeStuff.info. If you want to support the work in this channel, there are 3 things you can do. First of all, you can like this video. Second, you can subscribe to both of my YouTube channels, the UkeStuff channel and the Uke Playlines channel. And third, you can always buy me a cup of coffee to say thank you for making this content at www.buymeacoffee.com/UkeStuff. Now, why am I reviewing this instrument? I have a friend who emails me from time to time about ukulele matters, and he told me, Rick, told me about the Morse ukulele video that's out there. I'll put the link below in the description of this video, which is a tour of the Morse factory of them making an ukulele similar to this. It might have been a concert or a tenor that they were building in the video, but it's this company making this sort of instrument. And when I saw that they were $39 on Amazon, I figured that if I'm ever going to show my students that video of them making it in the factory, it'd be kind of cool to have one around, and at $39 I could afford to do that. So again, we're going to go through the normal things that we would do with any ukulele, even though this one may be on display. I also want to admit that yesterday, as I was playing it and sort of doing some extra measurements, I've had it around for a while, it fell. It fell pretty hard. It managed to weather the fall pretty good, but it feels like there's a slight crack up here. I put some super glue in that crack, and that's feeling better. There's no extra buzzes or any other problems that I'm noticing with it, but it did have a pretty hard tumble at school yesterday. We've got those terrazzo floors that are stronger than concrete. So anyway, it survived that fall pretty well, and that's impressive as well. Not something you normally want to test with your instruments. So let's get into the subjective categories. In terms of cost, I'm not sure you're going to find a better instrument for cheaper today. It's $39 shipped, and there are taxes probably where you live, but beyond that, that's pretty inexpensive for a usable instrument off of Amazon too. So there you go. In terms of value, as a result, it is off the scale in terms of value because it's actually playable. It works as an instrument, has some unique features, and although it comes with a kit, it comes with a pretty decent gig bag. It looks like the same sort of gig bag as you get from Rock Jams, so whatever company in China produces these. Morse bought them and had them, screen printed with their logo. And it also comes with a strap and strap buttons, which is nice, and a pretty decent tuner. That kit alone, the gig bag, the tuner, and the strap is probably worth close to the $39. Plus you get an instrument. And quite honestly, even if you didn't like the instrument, you could harvest parts here for other instruments and other projects. So yeah, the value here is extreme. Now, in terms of build quality, overall, I think it looks pretty good on the outside. Now, we'll get into appearance in a moment, but it looks like it was made well. I'm not going to hold the fact that there's a little bit of a rough area here where it dropped yesterday against the company. That's not the company's fault. Well, it actually isn't my fault. It's the student's fault, but we're not going to get into that and blaming that. It's not the company's fault. But otherwise, it's got nice rounded edges. It's well built. The fretboard could use some oil, and I probably will, as could the bridge. The bridge is huge, but it's functional. You've got a comfort edge, which actually I am noticing as you play it is actually really pretty nice for how I play a soprano. And altogether, it's pretty cleanly built. I mean, the joint is nice. It's nicely made. There's no pooling of like stain or anything. It's a satin finish. So overall, I'm pretty impressed with the build. Let's take a look at the inside. Now, while I call this the internal Uke Cam, it's just an endoscope looking at the inside of the instrument. So let's do that. There's the label, and let's look down. And as we look down here, we can see a horizontal brace there, a horizontal brace on the back. It's not a ton of glue mess there. You can see the pin bridge popping through. Maybe sort of a sliver of wood where that bridge pin comes in, but not a lot of glue mess. Pretty decent laminate. We'll talk about that in appearance. It may not be necessarily the prettiest laminate, but it's decent quality laminate. It's not overly thick, and it looks pretty good. You have a tail block, so that strap button is screwed into something solid. You've got your standard notch kerfing. Pretty clean standard build, particularly for a $39 ukulele. Now let's look at the upper bout. It's often hard to get far enough back here, but you can see notch kerfing. There's your neck block. Overall, a little bit of glue up there, not a ton. A little bit of glue down there. It's generally a pretty clean build. And that's our quick look at the inside of the Morse MUS-110 Soprano Ukulele. So overall, I'm impressed with the build quality. I think it's pretty clean, pretty nice. Now, appearance, it's pretty plain, but there's a couple things that we have to note. First of all, it does have the comfort edge. It does have a pin bridge. These are unusual on a soprano. Does it happen? Sure. Is it that common? Not really. To have those features but not a bound fretboard is strange. Closed geared tuners, some people hate them. I think they're fine. They work just fine. Some people don't like the ears up there. It's sort of a standard headstock shape. It's attractive in its own, style. It's a very light mahogany. It's a lemon mahogany, so it's a very light stain. That pattern on the top isn't unattractive, but it's also not super interesting at the same time. The sides especially are not that interesting. There's some nice striping on the back. Actually, the nicest grain is on the headstock there, if you look there. So there is a laser etched rosette right there. All good. Flowers doesn't bother me, especially for $39. I can put up with it. I might like to see a different rosette there or an inlay, but nonetheless, for $39 with some of these features, that's kind of unheard of. So the appearance is more than just plain because of some of these added features, but it's also still pretty plain for a laminate mahogany entry-level ukulele at the same time. Now, in terms of availability, if you want to find one of these, you can buy one right now at Amazon, $39. Just look up Morse Soprano Ukulele. In terms of playability, you have a couple of things going on here. First of all, there are some sharp fret ends. And I'll adjust that right now. There's a real easy way to fix that. All you need is a sanding sponge. Now, would I do this with a $500 on-up ukulele? Probably not. And if I was really concerned about the instrument, I'd tape it down. I'd tape down the sides, but I'm not interested in that. I'm not worried about that right now. So you just take a sanding sponge and you can sand the edges at a 45-degree angle. you're really not going to hurt the fretboard at all. You could scratch the finish here, so you can tape that if you want to, and you can actually sand through tape up here. But if you just do a little bit of sanding, suddenly your sharp fret ends go away. Now, do I still think that an instrument should be shipped with smooth fret ends? Yes, I do. Interestingly, this approach is what they use in the factory. When you watch the video, that's how they're smoothing the fret ends as well. Now, what ends up happening is that this rosewood, which is probably rosewood fretboard, ends up drying out and shrinking a little bit from the time that it's in the factory. And as a result, the frets then stick out. Now, I no longer have any sharp fret ends. Doesn't look terrible. Again, would I do that with an expensive ukulele? No, I'd buy the actual fret end file. And I actually do have one of those at home. But for quick sanding on an inexpensive ukulele, that's the way to do it, really. And then suddenly you don't have a problem anymore. No more sharp fret ends. So that playability issue is solved. Now, it is a standard 35 millimeter nut with a chunky, deep C-shaped neck, but that's what you're getting for many of these instruments. We have not yet had the shift in the industry to allow for a thinner neck most of the time. That's on my wish list. That's the next big change I'd like to see to happen with all the companies. They don't have to be super thin, but I would like to see them thinner than the C-shaped necks that we do see today. Now, in terms of sound quality, laminates have a bad reputation. There are some laminates that sound really good. I wouldn't say this instrument sounds really good, but there are overtones happening here. It's got 5 or 6 seconds of sustain with overtones popping out of the top. And even though it does have that laminate sort of warmish tone that laminate often has, it's not boxed or caught like so many cheap ukuleles. So that's right off the bat where I go, holy cow, if you're looking for a beginner ukulele for a person that's in the soprano scale, I don't know if you can go wrong here with the tone that isn't sound like a super, super cheap tone here. As long as you like the other features of this ukulele, this is a home run. Are there some things in the kit that probably you don't need? Yes, and we'll get to that later when I get to specifications. But nonetheless, I think the tone here is good. It's not a crummy tone. It's not super loud or barky. And that's another really interesting. We like to say that sopranos should be kind of punchy, barky, snappy. And this one, I would not use the word snappy or barky. It has more of the qualities of sort of like a concert ukulele than it does a soprano. It's not a bad thing. It's just a little different. We usually like sopranos that be really barky and rhythmic. And this, you can absolutely play things other than rhythmic things and make them sound good on this instrument. So the sound is pretty good. It's not the best, but it's definitely not bad. The volume is decent. It's not soft, but it's certainly not loud. And then the tone, it does lean towards that warmer side, but the bright overtones are there. Now let's take a look at what Tonal Energy Tuner shows for the harmonic energy of the instrument as I play it. Here we go. Now I find that to be interesting because after those lows fade, you see that sort of mid come up again. That's unusual for a laminate, and it's unusual for a cheap ukulele. I'm not saying that's good. I'm saying it's different. This instrument has different quality characteristics than your standard sort of soprano laminate entry-level cheap ukulele. All right, now that we've discussed the subjective categories, let's get into the specifications of this instrument. This is a soprano ukulele with a scale length of 13.625 inches from nut to saddle. It has 15 frets with 12 to the body. It does have side position markers, and the body style is a double bout with the comfort edge. I think that's important. And if you watch the video of these being made, you can see them putting that in, which is pretty interesting. The soundboard is laminate mahogany, as are the back and sides. The fretboard appears to be rosewood, as does the bridge, and it is a pin bridge. Now, a pin bridge is kind of unique for entry-level instruments. There are some high-end instruments, such as canaleas, that use a pin bridge. There are instruments throughout the price range that will use a pin bridge, but it's definitely not common on a $39 soprano. That's not necessarily a good or bad thing either. It just is. And again, you would need a pin puller, and you would pop out the pin, you'd tie a knot at the bottom of the string or tie a bead on, feed the string through, put the pin in, pull the string up while you're putting the pin in, make sure it's in tight, and then fasten it to the top of the instrument if you were to buy one of these. It is not a radius fretboard. You wouldn't expect it. The bridge and saddle appear to be like a new bone or a tusk. It's not just the plain plastic. The coloring doesn't look just pure plastic. It could be. Now, there's nothing on the Amazon listing that says what material the saddle and nut are made of, but they do have sort of that ivorish color, which is kind of indicative of that tusk or new bone material. It is not a compensated saddle. It's straight across. The finish is a satin finish. The overall length is exactly 21 inches, and it weighs 15.2 ounces, which I think is pretty amazing, especially with the pin bridge, especially with the comfort edge, and these tuners. So you'd think that those little heavy additions would cause problems, and then the instrument balances out really rather nicely for all the things that it has here. It has closed geared tuners. Those are just sort of sticky covers that keep them from scratching. You would remove those if this was be your instrument. And the action here is really quite amazing. So yes, it had sharp fret ends. We dealt with that earlier in this video. Now the action at the first fret is only 0.42 millimeters. That's really low, and I don't hear any buzzing on this instrument as I go up the strings or as I play it. Usually you'd have that by the time you got to the 5th fret. So there is no apparent buzzing here at really low action at the nut. And then the action at the 12th fret here is 2.46 millimeters, which is also nice and low. So not only do you have an instrument that sounds good, it also has really, really good action. So it's super playable for a beginner too. Now, if you buy a Morse, could it be possible that the action won't be good? Yes, that's absolutely possible with a $39 ukulele, but it's probably worth the risk, especially if you can just send it back on Amazon if it's not good. You could also learn how to adjust it yourself, but that's a whole nother point altogether. Now, another thing I look at is the nut width. This is 34.9 millimeters, which is your standard 35 millimeter nut. And the string spacing at the first fret is 8.8 millimeters between each string, which is 29.4 GDA, which is very standard. And then the depth of the neck at the 3rd fret shows you, again, the chunky neck style. At the 3rd fret, from the top of the strings to the bottom of the neck is 21.8 millimeters, which is pretty thick considering that the action is so low. So again, on my wish list for this instrument would just be a thinner neck. If it had a thinner neck, I'd be happy with it. Some people that don't like 35 millimeter nuts will not like this instrument, but I'm used to that. I would just like a thinner neck. Now, with those specifications, we are now going to summarize the instrument and give it a UkeGuide rating out of 5 possible ukuleles. Again, this instrument was brought to my attention from my friend Rick, who emailed me and sent me a video of a factory where these are being made. Again, that video will show up in the description below that you can take a look at. Hopefully it stays up. You can watch one of these being built from start to finish. I plan to eventually show that video to my students, and I wanted one to show them after it was made so they could see in person what had been made in that factory. I thought that was a pretty cool idea. And when I saw it was only $39, yeah, I absolutely jumped on that. Now, this is not a surprise. This is an entry-level instrument, but for an entry-level instrument, it has a few things going for it. First of all, it is really cleanly built. Second, it has a pretty decent tone. It doesn't sound like a terrible, cheap ukulele, like rubber bands in a box, like you can hear sometimes. Some of the ukuleles I've reviewed have not sounded good at all. It also doesn't sound like a standard soprano that's really snappy. It sounds more like a concert. So it's got a warm sound. I would change the strings to some kind of fluorocarbon, I think, to get more shimmer out of the instrument, and hopefully that it has that. But it does have really good overtones. It comes with a pretty decent kit. So it comes with a decent gig bag. It comes with a tuner. It comes with a strap and strap buttons. There are some things that you really don't need, such as the ubiquitous ukulele entry level book, which I mean is meant to try to help you, but really it's not so great. It comes with plastic picks, which I would not use. It will eventually destroy the instrument, so use a felt or leather pick for most people. And then it also comes with some spare what are labeled as Aquila strings. And I would be tempted to send these back to Aquila, say, are these really yours? It really doesn't matter because I would replace these strings one way or another. I would, if I was a school and buying this instrument, I would replace the strings with, for example, Aquila kid strings with the colors for instructional purposes. Or if this was mine, I would probably try it with a fluorocarbon, a clear fluorocarbon first. And if that didn't sound so good, then I would try perhaps a brown fluorocarbon, like a Worth Brown. But otherwise, it is pretty amazing. Now, it did have some sharp fret ends, and I showed how to use a sanding sponge. By the way, this sanding sponge came from the Dollar Tree in the US. It's a sort of a cheap convenience store where things used to be just $1. Now they're $1.25 or more, but they sell these, and I picked up the little, not only the sanding sponge, but the little holder that goes with it there for inexpensive. And you can just sand the sides of the ukulele at an angle and get rid of those frets. Again, don't do that with an expensive ukulele, or if you think you're going to scratch something, use some masking tape. You can even masking tape the fret ends, but that solves the problem. So altogether, I think this is a really good bargain for $39. I would definitely recommend this. And for a rating, I would give this 4 out of 5 possible ukuleles. All right, thanks so much for joining me for this video. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll be back soon with some more Uke stuff for you.